one of those things is the family. I don't know if you've read reports that have come out recently about the significance of the home and particularly parents in terms of seeing faith shaped in children and young people. There may have been people that have already spoken at these ReNew sessions that have talked a bit about this. But the Gen Z report from Youth for Christ that came out a few years ago, the Theos report from 2016, which was a kind of compendium, if you like, of 40 reports into how faith is formed and shaped and developed. Parents, the home, are the most significant influences on faith in terms of the next generation. So when we're shaping our vision around what the church looks like and how we engage well with children, young people and families, we have to be thinking about how we're partnering with the home. How are we sharing this journey of faith with the home? I would argue that the home is the incubator of faith for the next generation. And we get to maybe have 2 hours with children and young people on a Sunday and midweek if we add those things together. But outside of the kind of the church environment, the home is the place where they spend the most time, then it's school, then way down the line is church. And sometimes I think in terms of a vision that parents have of the church is we're going to do in half an hour with little Johnny what they're not able to do the rest of the week. And we somehow need to dispel that myth that the church is going to sort out their children. We have to get better at working in partnership and supporting and helping parents have confidence about what faith looks like in the home and sharing that journey together. And one of the challenges for us perhaps is many of the resources that are produced for children's and youth ministry are focused on supporting us while we're in a group rather than focused on supporting the discipleship journey of children and young people. Does that make sense? It's activity-based material for us as we're running groups. It's less about here are some tools that you need to give to children and young people that will help them in their own journey with God. So I think we have to pay attention to that. So working with the home, supporting children and young people in their homes and creating space for ministry with families in our children's and youth ministry should be a key part of our pattern, and I would say our vision for how we move things forward. This next one for me is super key, the prophetic, and that's about paying attention to what children and young people are saying to us. 2020, we'd had the kind of awful news from America, George Floyd being murdered. And in our small town in Clitheroe, a young person from the grammar school was 18. She decided we needed to do something and recognise the challenge of racism in society and culture off the back of what happened to George Floyd. She arranged a gathering at Castle Field, so just down from our castle I've already mentioned. 250 people came along to that. She'd got speakers in, she'd got people to talk to us about it. The only person who didn't rock up was the sitting MP. We won't go into that, but you know, just she engaged with people in the community and she galvanized something with bringing us together to help us think, actually, let's not go with this. Let's see how we can stand up to racism right where we are, not just think it's happening somewhere else. What kind of super encouraged me, but also saddened me a bit, was 70% of those in the park were young people. And I didn't really see much representation from local churches. And I was like, man, if there's anything, we should be here supporting this, surely. And what was interesting, thinking again about young people and their prophetic voice to us, when again, going back to the Gen Z research, when young people were asked, what are the things that most bother you in the world or you're most concerned about? It was war, it was poverty, and it was racism. And if you think about where we are right now, we've got a war in Ukraine that is impacting Europe. We've got poverty with a cost of living crisis and increasing challenges for people. We're going to have people destitute in the UK as a result of what's going on with prices. And we continue to have issues in the world with racism. And this was 2016, this kind of survey, the prophetic voice of young people. So we really need to pay attention to that. The question for me in terms of our youth and children's ministry practice and our vision for it as the church is, do we do youth and children's work to young people? Do we do it for young people, which is better than doing it to them? Do we do it with young people, which I think is even better if we can? And then I would argue we need to move to a point where youth work's being done by young people. And by that I mean peer discipleship stuff, where older young people are beginning to lead and take responsibility, and we're creating space within the church for that to be something that happens. So in terms of a vision for the church, there's 4 simple things I think young people need from us. And that's children and young people, and I would say families: acceptance, love, guidance, and significance. You know, we create space for those things. We say you're welcome here. We love people. And there's a difference between being a guru and being a guide. So when we think about guidance, I'm not thinking about we know best. I'm thinking about being on a shared journey of discovery with children, young people, and families. And for me, that should be a key part of our vision. Not that we know best, but that we're on this same journey with you to discover more about who Jesus is. So let's walk this journey together. And then significance is about creating a space where children and young people's voices aren't just heard, but we create space for them to contribute and help shape what worship, what our practice looks like as the church. In some ways, although it's delightful at Christmas, the worst thing we can do is just roll out kids at Christmas to sing Away in a Manger. Because what happens then is the church's response is, is that the response we generally want the church to have whenever children and young people are present, leading us in worship or doing something at the front? Oh, bless them, look at them having a go. I mean, it's patronizing, apart from anything else, but it also kind of sets the tone, perhaps, for what we expect. And yet, if you think about Samuel's call in the temple, you know, he didn't sing Away in a Manger as his first message to Eli and his family. It was shocking stuff he had to share as his first, this is what the Lord's saying to you. Basically, Eli, your sons are a load of, you know, people messing about, and you know, the Lord's not happy. Imagine if our kids stood up and said that to us in church. Would we pay attention? So there's something about the prophetic we need to press into, where we pay attention, but more than tokenism, we really listen to what our children and young people are saying to us and allow what they bring to shape how we look at what the church is up to. So not only listening, but we need to act on the prophetic voice of young people. We should pattern aspects of our work with young people around the themes, and these I think are particularly important themes for young people: justice and stewardship. You know, what does that look like for us in the church? Young people care about whether something is fair and right. And I think that's a godly care they have there when they're thinking about justice. And stewarding the resources that we've been given, the world, you know, the challenge around the environment. Young people are there already. We just need to, you know, step into that space with them, allow them to lead us, perhaps. And for me, that's part of what should be our vision as the church, is to give space for young people to bring leadership in places where we're falling behind or we haven't grasped what's important at the moment. And then the equipped. This is really just about equipping young people for when they're not with us. It's more important than what we do with them in the room or on the Zoom. It's how we're giving them tools and resources that help them build spiritual practices into their life with God. How do we help them journey with Him when they're not with us? We were a little bit shook in our own house when my 16-year-old daughter said, right, I need devotionals that aren't just on the phone or, you know, stuff I have to download or look at on a device. She was challenging us, saying there's nothing decent. Everything is about go on YouVersion or use Lectio. We don't encourage, you know, with our daughters for them to have their phones in their room at bedtime. Just not good practice. We don't do it. So actually the flip side then is, well, I need really decent devotions that aren't on a device. And I was like, wow, I don't know if there's hardly anything that exists that's not on a device anymore. Maybe we need to write some. She started writing her own. Not so much for herself, but she started writing her own, thinking these need to be there. And just, there's that desire and that hunger to press into stuff that is what God is saying. I guess one of the challenges for me, thinking about just ministry in general, is, are we encouraging and are we expecting, is there a low bar around what we're expecting our young people to bring? Whenever I've done a survey with churches around what young people want more of, it is always more Bible study, never less. Every time I've done a survey, what would you like more of in the church for you as a young person? More Bible study, please. Every time. So, maybe it's the kind of churches I'm working with, but it's what the young people are asking for. When I've done weekends away, the best bit of the weekend for a young person is when I say, right, disappear for 15 minutes. You've got your Bible, you've got a notebook, you've got a pen, find some space, just you and God. Read something, pray, jot stuff down that you think God's saying to you. And honestly, I can't get them back when we do it. And the first time I did it, I thought they're all messing about somewhere. They all disappeared off. They're all hiding and playing a game or doing something crazy. But when I went hunting, I found them just up a tree with their Bible and a notepad, off in a field, praying somewhere. Couldn't get them back. Because how often do we actually give them permission to have that kind of space and that retreat from the world? And what would it be like if we did it? For me, that's part of my vision for children's and youth work, for the church, is to create that kind of space for encounter that isn't mediated by me as a leader, but enables them to be in a space where they can connect with God themselves in their own way, in a way that makes sense to them. I think that's crucial for them to grow in faith. And finally, just want to mention this, the idea of being with, to receive God's gifts and be changed and transformed by him. And there's a book that came out just last year from Andrew Root, which was called The End of Youth Ministry. Really encouraging book to read if you're thinking about vision for the future. But it's basically, he says, if I was to sum it up, and he sums it up like this: youth ministry is for joy. Think about that for a minute. What is the purpose of our ministry to children, young people and families? Separate from that, I was doing an activity with some kids that was part of our kids club, and we were looking at the Good Shepherd, John 10. And we talked about Jesus being the Good Shepherd. And we just asked the question, what would it be like to have Jesus as our shepherd and walk with him? And the kids all had sheep that they had to colour and draw, and they could write stuff on these sheep. And then we all walked around the room and came to this nice green blanket that had been laid out, which was the lovely pasture that Jesus has prepared for us. So we all walked around the room, barring like sheep, and arrive at this pasture. And then I just looked at some of these sheep that the children had written on and drawn on, and added the usual cotton wool to make a sheep look like a sheep. And then there was one child who'd written, she'd been thinking about what is it like to be walking with Jesus, and she wrote on her sheep, walk with joy, which I just think is fantastic. Isn't that what it should be like to be in relationship with Jesus? Goes back a little bit to the prophetic, because I felt that was a prophetic word for me, but also for the church. That's how we should be. But there's this idea for me about that should be what it is about, delighting in God and delighting in one another. What if that was our vision for the church? This is a place where we don't look sad and somber. We joyfully celebrate all that God is and what he's doing for us. Our services are full of joy. I grew up in a small Baptist church, and we used to sing a song, "You Shall Go Out with Joy." And we looked like the most miserable bunch of people you've ever seen singing it. That's not the kind of church I want to be part of, or for my children. So there's got to be something in there for me about the joy of knowing Jesus being rediscovered for us in the church. And that casting a vision of relationship and safety and coming to this place of goodness that God's prepared for us, what might that look like? I can get very excited about that. I'm going to finish in a second so we can have a bit more chat maybe in breakout rooms. But I want to just, lastly, John Westhoff says we're a story-formed people. And this bit from page 165 of Andrew Root's book, I just think is really important. So this is from The End of Youth Ministry. Youth ministry, and I think in terms of church ministry, children's ministry, family ministry, how we engage with those not in the church, should forget about competing in the battle of things. Think about all the consumer stuff, the things that everybody in society is encouraged to go after, and instead profoundly concern ourselves with stories. And I think for me, vision is at the heart of our vision for children, young people and families is what's the story we're seeking to live out in our communities? What's the story that our church has? You know, our church has been here for 1,000 years. Is that significant? Does that make a difference? I think right now it really does. Certainly in England, we've seen cathedral worship rocket in the last couple of years. And I think that's because people have a real sense of God's been worshipped in this space for 1,000 years. Everything else may be going to pot, but this place, people have worshipped here. And there's been consistency about that presence. We can tell that story. Telling our own stories when we have guests in to talk to the kids and they share their testimony, the kids are on the edge of the carpet. They don't sit on seats. They're on the edge of the carpet, just drawing in these stories from people of different ages as they talk about their own life with God. There's something incredible about the stories that we can live and share. And for me, that should be at the heart of our vision for how we engage well with children, young people and families. Last thing. We need to treasure connection over the activities and the programs and the stuff. It's in those relationships that meaningful stuff happens that we can't plan for necessarily. It just comes about because we're in relationship with one another. And that sometimes is more messy than having something very clear, like here's an activity, here's a program, here's the schedule. But actually it's those connections that make things work or don't work. We can have lots of activities and just narrow, shallow, not real relationships. It's much better to build consistent, dedicated, committed relationships with people, and they know we're there and we're present as the church and as those doing children's, youth and family ministry. Over to you, Isabel, unless you want to throw us into breakout rooms once again.
I think let's go straight into breakout groups. You've had a further wonderful key principles to explore. So I think we've got lots to talk about, but only 5 minutes. So I'll put you into groups again, and then we'll come back after 5 minutes. Thanks, Ali. Great. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you so much, Ali. You've given us so much to think about and some really good key principles about how to develop a vision that specifically engages and moves us forward in our connections and ministry with children, young people and families. So lots to think about there and some really key principles. If you want to see Ali's slides, maybe you could email me afterwards and I can send them to you, but I'll be sending you a lot of follow-up information as well. I'd like to now invite Jamie Milliken to join us. And Jamie is going to share a bit about what he's been doing in his context, in his community, in his church, in refocusing the direction of the church. So Jamie, thank you for joining us. Jamie's the minister at Dreghorn and Springside Parish Church in Irvine and Kilmarnock. Jamie, tell us what's been happening in your area.
Thank you for that, Isabel. What I'm going to do is this isn't a teach as such. It's very much a story, and it's a story from my own context, and some things people might think that speaks to them and other things it might not, but I'm hoping it is of value just as we go through it. Thank you very much, Ali, for your input earlier on there as well, which I will complement, I think, in some of the things which I say. So what we've been trying to do down here in Irvine is grow an intergenerational church, and that's an intergenerational church we're trying to grow from scratch. The name of it is Crossing Together, and the reason why we've called it that is because we're crossing from being a way which we have been doing church into a new way of doing church, of being church, where we're crossing parish boundaries, which is involving 2 congregations that were recently, until very recently, 3, because of changes in the church that's going on at the moment. And we're crossing age groups because traditionally we do church in age-specific ministry, but we're saying, well, let's not do that. Let's do it by spiritual preferences instead. So we're kind of crossing things around a wee bit and seeing what comes out the other side. And so what I'll do at the moment is explain to you the story of where we've been and where we're going and where we'd like to get to. So we're in Irvine and Kilmarnock Presbytery, and Irvine and Kilmarnock Presbytery has been on a mission trajectory for a good number of years now. And we listened to the radical action plan that came out of the Church of Scotland and thought, well, this isn't just words, we need to put flesh to this. And so a lot of hard discussions went on. And as a consequence of that, we took 4 of our full-time ministry posts and we created mission pioneer posts with those posts. We had a lot of discussion about how we would grow fresh expressions of church, and each congregation was invited to participate in those conversations, which were all done on Zoom because we're in lockdown at the time. Alan McWilliam of Forge facilitated those for us, and he had us talking about what mission ideas were coming up in our congregations. And between ourselves and a neighbouring parish, we realised that there was a real need to begin to engage with children and young people. So we began to discuss that and think about how we could do that. And from that, we then put in a bid for a mission pioneer worker. And we were successful, one of the successful 6 projects in our presbytery, to have a part-time worker to help us, not to run this, because if they run it as soon as that person's job goes, which is likely to be in a few years' time, the way things are looking at the moment, then everything would fall apart. For that person's job is to help stimulate and facilitate and support and encourage to enable things to happen. We also, at the same time, we're also going through the Forge course. It's a pioneer course, which is a 1-year course that Presbytery paid for about 20 or so of us in Presbytery to go on. And alongside that, we cairn learning communities as well. And we had another maybe 20 or 30 people engaged with those. So we all kind of got a good idea through that of what mission can look like, and to also think and pray as to where God might be leading us from that. We developed a 3-year action plan, and we've been running now probably for about 10 months or so. So that's the kind of background of how we got to where we are, and now I'll kind of explain some of the things that we're doing at the moment. We're trying to build an intergenerational church. That's a church which is neither for young people or old people, but it's for all age groups together. It seeks to bring the generations together in one place where everyone is involved in some way, shape or form, in learning together, in serving together, in leading together. And what we want to do is see a faithful transformation of individuals and of the community which we're in as well. What happened was that the Church of Scotland united a congregation with 2 congregations together, and they left a housing estate without a worshipping congregation on a Sunday morning. At the same time, a lot of other services were leaving that housing estate as well. So the shops are to be demolished, so none of the new shop units are being, none of the existing shop units are being filled once people leave them. The library has closed, and so forth, and people just feel as if all the services are leaving the community. So we thought it was important that we remain as a Christian presence there, but not the same old Christian presence which hadn't worked anymore, but to try and plant something new. We decided that we're going to try and do this looking at spiritual preferences for people's intergenerational church, looking at spiritual preferences, which is the 4 different things of word, emotion, symbol, and action. And we would try and build church, our way that we were church around about those. And I've also got an eye of what it is actually to be the church as well, looking at the 3 marks of church of the Reformation, which is that the word is purely preached, Sacraments are administered according to Christ's ordinance, and that discipline is rightly exercised. And I'll come back to all that stuff in a wee while. So just to explain where we are at the moment, we're on our 3-year plan. We're, as I said, about 10 months into that. We're just about finishing our community research part of that at the moment. But we felt as if we wanted to get involved and to do things as early as we could. So we're mindful of something called the Engel scale. I don't know if people have heard of that. The Engel scale kind of takes people from a place where maybe they're quite hostile to the church or they're indifferent to Christianity, and then takes them up to, say, a place where they become, where they make a commitment of faith, and then after that, then they move into a place where they grow in development of that faith and discipleship. And so we're trying to meet people at different places, like pre-faith, and we've got a number of different things that run to do that. So we started up a kind of gazebo ministry where we took a gazebo into the shopping centre I was talking about, and we used that to get to meet people. We set it up there. We handed out sort of messy church goodie bags that some people were giving out during lockdown, that sort of thing. We explored and explained what we were looking for, and we also listened. That's a really important part, listening what the community were looking for as well. We then had a day serving burgers, and we had another day where we used the church building for a soup event, really just kind of serving the community and welcoming them in. It poured, and a lot of people, the contacts we built up on Facebook, decided that they weren't going to come because the weather was so bad. But tragically, a woman had gone missing in the community, and the fire brigade were out and the police were out, and they were able to use our soup station as we set up for them to come in and get dried off and to get a bit of heat about them as well. So even though it didn't work as we expected it to, I think that God was still in about that. We run something called Tea and Toast, which takes place in a morning. We're hoping to get the traffic of people who've dropped kids off at school and then come back in again maybe afterwards to spend some time together with their friends. What we're finding is we're getting a lot of sometimes church members come along to that, sometimes quite needy people who travel between different churches and they're just looking for a place to call home for a while. So it's not really hitting the target that we're hoping for. But as I said, the library services have recently left the area, so we've organised to do click and collect for the library. So some people come in and pick up the library books and drop them off from us, and sometimes they say and sometimes they go, and sometimes they say maybe next time. That's kind of how that's working for us at the moment. We run something called, what else we're trying to do is we've got a New to Me clothes bank, which we're about to start up, on the understanding that a lot of people are struggling at the moment. Ali was mentioning community there, mentioning poverty there, and we're trying to sort of set up a clothes exchange. But we could also do something like a steamy church as well. I don't know that idea, the old Glasgow steamy, where you get lots of washing machines and folk ironing, and we could maybe kind of, I don't know, think of something there. I'm just throwing that out as nonsense. We have a walk and talk group, which meets on a Wednesday morning, and that's thinking about people's health, and it's also thinking about social isolation as well. And we had 2 messy churches running already, but we decided that we would also like to grow a third one. So that's 2 that are running in the existing congregation. That was 2 that became 1, but have kept both of those going. And we started one as well. So we've also got messy churches feeding into this intergenerational mix of things as well. So we've got lots of different things running for lots of different age groups. And we had a candlelit parade at Christmas, where we have a DJ in the congregation, and he just took his boombox and had some carols, also some sort of other Christmas music as well. And we went a short candlelit parade through the centre of the place, which was pedestrianised, and then up to the church for marshmallows and coffee. That was another kind of community engagement. Sorry, marshmallows and chocolate. That was another community engagement event. We've also had 2 praise and prayer nights as well. And these were targeting people who are existing Christians. And we did that because we wanted to test our format of spiritual preferences, but also because it's really important to build volunteers around about us, and to have people praying for what's going on as well. So I'll give you a pretty quick example of what we did at that. So we took those 4 different things. So the word, we took the valley of dry bones from Ezekiel 37, because that represented the community that a lot of people thought was dead, that had been left, and no one was really bothering with it anymore. And we took that story and brought it into the space where we were all thinking about it in our different ways. I ran a Discovery Bible Study series, which is a really great way of engaging with the word with people who are coming fairly new to it. I'd recommend people look that one up to look at that. We had, for the emotion part of it, we had a drama. We imagined what it would be like if the Holy Spirit suddenly came through the mall in Irvine, and all these people who are walking about their heads down, feeling despondent, came alive with it. We thought about symbol, and we used artwork for that, and intergenerational being involving young people in leadership. We had a 15-year-old who came up with a plan for that and led it as well. And she looked at recycling, because we're thinking about things that people are throwing away. And we built a sculpture from that to depict new life coming from that which is old. And the other one, which is action, which is we had a group get together and look at all these services that have moved out of the community. Where could we support the community, and also who could we team up with in the community to work alongside? So there's a cleanup crew in Irvine who look to try and keep the place clean. There's a food larder we could get involved in, and that's kind of how we ran that. And we found that way of working meant that you were mixing the age groups together, and each one was learning according to their spiritual style, spiritual preference, which was good as well. We ran those in the evenings, and that's not conducive for children's ministry. So the last one we ran there, which was just before Easter, was our Easter Explore event. And at that, we kind of stuck with the same kind of spiritual preferences with somebody in the congregation who was a children's entertainer on cruise ships before retiring. And he's great at telling the Christian story in a really animated way. We had 24/7 prayer team come in and design for us a quiet space for people to go and reflect in. Thinking about the cross. And that space was used quite unexpectedly by social work, who were having a supervised meeting between families, and they went into that quiet space and had that going on there. So again, God working in ways that we weren't expecting, but it was happening. We had a kind of a scavenger hunt where we're going out and looking into the community for signs of the Easter story, stones and leaves and sticks and one thing or another we could make into the story. And really, it was about getting to know people again, and it was about feeding people. We fed probably over 100 people that day, which was really good. We're planning ahead, looking at a 3-day summer club, if we can get enough volunteers to get that to happen. And we're looking also at hitting the key festivals and anything else that comes up in that space in between. And I'm also thinking about how do we then help people to grow as disciples as they go through this. And I'm really interested if anyone knows if there's an intergenerational pack or something like Christianity Explored, but that's very adult targeted, but something which would be for the whole church family to help people to learn together. And if anyone knows anything about that, then I'd be really interested in finding out. So we're intergenerational. We're looking at our different styles, and people are taking part in those according to their preference as opposed to just their age group. But we are disparate groups. We've got all these different things going on. And what keeps me awake at night is how do we take all this good stuff that's happening and actually make it or enable it to be a group of people meeting and worshiping together. We are a church, yes. The word is being preached maybe more effectively through the spiritual preferences than it is me standing up on a Sunday morning and preaching a sermon. And some people buying into that and some people not. In Sunday school, equally the same thing happening there. Messy sacraments, thinking about intergenerational church and the sacraments. I've had a messy baptism before during messy church and a messy wedding in the sense that it took place in a messy church environment as opposed to it was messy. And that was really positive and good. So I think there is potential there for sacraments in my own congregation. We do have children in communion as well. So I don't really see there being a problem with that. And as far as discipline goes, we're very much within the presbytery model of they've got oversight of us, and we've got elders from the different congregations who are involved who provide a support committee for us as well. Challenges, as Ali said, we're trying to do too much, and sometimes that's really difficult, but also there's pressure on us because we're being expected to grow quickly, because Presbytery is supporting this, and in a challenging time when every full-time equivalent ministry is being scrutinised, then we really want to make it look as if this one's working. But I think we're growing too fast because of that. And opportunities, we might be growing a fresh expression of church, a real intergenerational church from scratch, which would be amazing. And also we're trying to take the things that we are doing in the intergenerational church and the new one into being supporting the traditional church as well. So crossover between the two things as well, and that takes time. So what we're doing is we're playing about at the moment, not playing about, we're being genuine about trying to grow a church, which is a lot easier to do when you're doing it as a standalone than when you're actually trying to do it in your own congregation, because I have been the last 15 years trying to do this in congregations, and I know how tough it is. I have spoken probably longer than you expected me to speak, Isabel. I'm sorry. I spoke very fast to try and fit it all in, but I hope it's been of use to people.
Thank you so much, Jamie. Some great examples there. And I think just the whole intentionality and how do we do this and that journey towards being intergenerational, really, really good to hear. But also that you actually felt you had to pull it out of the sort of traditional congregational model. I want to put you into your same groups again, but you haven't got very long. There are 3 questions in the chat, and how I suggest you do that is that each of you reflect on one of those questions. You can choose which question you want to reflect on as to where you are in your context in relation to that particular question. So just go into your rooms and have that discussion for just about 5 minutes.